How does a city of 8 million people allow 10 apex predators to hunt in plain sight for 50 years? The answer isn't in the killers, it's in the system that fed them. And by the time we close this archive, you'll understand why every fix the city implemented actually created the conditions for the next monster. By the end of this archive, we'll tell you the exact number of lives that were lost because the system chose procedure over protection. The number will shock you. Case number 1, the son of Sam, the media loop. July 1976, New York City is on the edge of bankruptcy. The garbage strike has left mountains of trash rotting on every corner. The subways are covered in graffiti so thick you can't see out the windows. A heat wave has turned the 5 boroughs into a pressure cooker, and the murder rate is climbing toward an all-time high. And then the letters start arriving. Not ransom notes, not political manifestos, not even traditional serial killer taunts. Invitations. A man who calls himself the son of Sam is writing directly to the tabloids, specifically to Jimmy Breslin at the New York Daily News. And he's not just confessing to murders. He's giving them his itinerary. He's telling them which neighborhoods he'll hunt in next. He's describing his weapon, a .44 caliber bulldog revolver. He's explaining his motive, a 6,000-year-old demon that speaks through a neighbor's dog. And the tabloids, they're printing every word. Why did he need an audience? Why wasn't killing enough? The answer reveals the first crack in the system, and it's not what you think. The NYPD has 5 boroughs to patrol, 8 million people to protect, and one man with a .44 caliber revolver who understands something the police don't. In New York, if you can control the narrative, you can control the city. This is David Berkowitz, postal worker, overweight, socially awkward, lives alone in a Yonkers apartment with blacked-out windows and walls covered in demonic graffiti. And for 13 months, he didn't just kill 6 people and wound 7 others. He held the entire city hostage with a typewriter. To understand what Berkowitz did to New York, you have to understand what New York did to Berkowitz. He was a man who felt erased by his own city. In criminal psychology, we call this social invisibility syndrome. You're not actively rejected, you're simply not seen. You walk into a room and people's eyes slide past you like you're furniture. Women look through you, not at you. You're the guy who delivers the mail, the guy who lives in the apartment at the end of the hall, the guy whose name no one can quite remember. And for certain personalities, specifically those with deep narcissistic wounds and a profound need for significance, that invisibility becomes a form of psychological suffocation. Berkowitz had tried everything to be noticed. He'd joined the army, he'd worked steady jobs, he'd tried to date, but every path led to the same dead end, irrelevance. So he did what New York had trained him to do. He didn't ask for attention, he didn't beg for recognition, he manufactured it. Berkowitz created a template that dozens of future killers would follow. We'll show you how his letters directly influenced 3 other cases in this archive. Every shooting was a chapter in a serialized thriller. Every letter was a cliffhanger. And the New York Post, the Daily News, the tabloid machine, they didn't just report the story, they participated in it. When Berkowitz wrote, "I am the son of Sam, I am a little brat," when Father Sam gets drunk, he gets mean. He beats his family. Sometimes he ties me up to the back of the house. Other times he locks me in the garage. Sam loves to drink blood. Go out and kill, commands Father Sam. The Post ran it verbatim in 72-point font above the fold. When he claimed he took orders from a neighbor's black Labrador named Harvey, the tabloids didn't fact-check it. They interviewed the dog's owner. The NYPD had 300 detectives working the case. Operation Omega was the largest manhunt in the department's history. They were checking ballistics, canvassing neighborhoods, following up on thousands of tips. But Berkowitz understood something they didn't. The real power in New York isn't the badge, it's the headline.
Every letter gave him more power. Every front page made him more mythic. And the more mythic he became, the more paralyzed the city was. By the summer of 1977, women were dyeing their hair blonde or cutting it short because Berkowitz seemed to prefer brunettes. Nightclubs were empty. Young couples stopped parking in cars. The entire city changed its behavior, not because of what Berkowitz had done, but because of what the media said he might do next. The letters weren't a cry for help. They were a tutorial in media manipulation. Berkowitz proved that in New York, you don't need to be powerful, you just need to be printed. July 13, 1977, the blackout. At 9:34 p.m., a series of lightning strikes hits power lines in Westchester County. Within minutes, the entire city goes dark. For 25 hours, New York descends into chaos, looting, arson, over 4,000 arrests, entire blocks in the Bronx are burning. The NYPD is so stretched, they barely can respond to 911 calls about murders, let alone property crimes. And Berkowitz is still out there. The city is terrified that he'll use the blackout as cover for another attack, but he doesn't strike that night. He waits, because Berkowitz isn't hunting in chaos, he's hunting in predictable patterns. And that predictability is what finally breaks the case, but not the way you expect. Not through brilliant detective work, not through a psychological profile, not through forensic science, through a parking ticket. How did a parking ticket solve the biggest manhunt in New York history? The answer exposes the first crack in the system. Here's what happened. On the night of July 31, 1977, Berkowitz drives to Brooklyn to hunt near a playground in Bath Beach. He parks his yellow 1970 Ford Galaxy near a fire hydrant on Bay 17th Street. A woman named Cecilia Davis is sitting on her stoop. She sees a man get out of the yellow car and walk toward the playground. Something about him makes her nervous. She watches him disappear into the darkness. Minutes later, she hears gunshots. The man comes running back, gets in the yellow car, and speeds away. Cecilia calls the police. She gives them a description of the car and the location, and the NYPD files her statement and then forgets about it. Why? Because they're drowning in tips. They're getting hundreds of calls a day. They have a task force of 300 detectives chasing leads across 5 boroughs. One woman saying she saw a suspicious man near a yellow car doesn't even register. But here's the thing. That night, a traffic cop issued exactly one parking ticket on Bay 17th Street. One ticket for a yellow Ford Galaxy parked near a fire hydrant. And the car was registered to David Berkowitz, 35 Pine Street, Yonkers. The information was sitting in a filing cabinet in the NYPD's Traffic Violations Bureau, but nobody looked at it, nobody cross-referenced it, nobody connected the dots, until a secretary named Wheat Carr was randomly going through parking violations from the Bath Beach area, not as part of the investigation, just as part of routine clerical work, and noticed that only one ticket had been issued that night. She mentioned it to a detective. The detective called Yonkers PD, and when they checked Berkowitz's apartment, they found a .44 caliber Bulldog revolver sitting on the front seat of his car, walls covered in demonic writing, a diary detailing every shooting. The largest manhunt in NYPD history was solved by a clerical accident. Not by the 300 detectives, not by the psychological profilers, by a secretary doing routine paperwork. When they arrested him on August 10, 1977, Berkowitz was sitting in his car outside his apartment. He didn't run, he didn't resist. He smiled at Detective Falataco and said, "Well, you got me. What took you so long?" He wasn't being smug. He was genuinely confused because he'd left clues everywhere. He'd told them where he'd strike. He'd described his weapon. He'd given them his manifesto. He'd practically drawn them a map in letters published in the city's biggest newspapers. And the system had been too overwhelmed, too bureaucratic, too focused on the spectacle of the manhunt to connect a parking ticket to a serial killer. The city failed because Berkowitz wasn't brilliant. It failed because the system prioritized performance over process. It prioritized the appearance of competence over actual coordination. In the interrogation room, Berkowitz dropped the demon dog story almost immediately. Watch the footage. He's not the raving lunatic the tabloids had painted him. He's calm, almost relieved. He speaks in a flat, nasal monotone like he's describing a grocery list. Detective Falataco: "David, why did you do it? Why did you kill those people?" Berkowitz: "I wanted to be noticed. I wanted people to know my name. I wanted to matter." This is the moment when the psychological profile that the NYPD had been working from, the profile of a delusional schizophrenic, completely evaporates. Berkowitz isn't crazy, he's strategic. He explains that the demon dog story was a backup plan, an insanity defense. He'd read about other serial killers
Successfully pleaded insanity, and he figured if he got caught, he'd play the voices in my head card. But in the interrogation room, faced with overwhelming evidence, he doesn't even bother. He tells them everything. The guns, the stalking patterns, the letters, the deliberate choice to target young couples in parked cars because it would generate the most fear. And then he says something that the detectives will never forget. "You guys made me famous. The newspapers made me famous. I was nothing before this. Now, everyone knows my name. That's all I ever wanted." The letters weren't just ego, they were a transaction. Berkowitz gave the tabloids a villain. The tabloids gave him immortality. David Berkowitz was sentenced to 365 years in prison, 6 consecutive 25-to-life sentences. He's currently 71 years old, sitting in Sullivan Correctional Facility in Fallsburg, New York. In the 1980s, he became a born-again Christian. He now goes by the name Son of Hope. He writes letters to victims' families asking for forgiveness. He does prison ministry. He says he's a changed man. But here's what actually changed after Berkowitz. New York passed the Son of Sam law in 1977, named explicitly after him. The law prevents criminals from profiting off their crimes through book deals, movie rights, interviews, or any form of media compensation. The logic was simple. You can't turn murder into money. But on paper, it sounds like justice. But here's the crack the law didn't address. The law stopped Berkowitz from profiting, but it didn't stop the media from making millions off him. It didn't stop the tabloids from selling papers. It didn't stop the producers from making movies. It just ensured that Berkowitz didn't get a cut. The city learned the wrong lesson. They didn't ask, why did we give him a platform? They didn't ask, how did sensational coverage contribute to the paralysis of the city? They didn't ask, should there be ethical guidelines for how the media covers active serial killers? They asked, how do we make sure he doesn't profit from the platform we gave him? And that distinction, that focus on punishing the symptom instead of addressing the disease, is the crack that the next killer would walk right through. Because while New York was congratulating itself for muzzling Berkowitz, while the tabloids were running retrospectives on the Summer of Sam, while the NYPD was holding press conferences about the success of Operation Omega, a 30-year-old landscaper named Joel Rifkin was sitting in his mother's basement in East Meadow, Long Island, fantasizing about the women he saw on the streets of the city. And he was learning the most important lesson from the Berkowitz case. Don't write letters. Don't call the press. Don't leave a signature. Just kill quietly, and the city won't even notice. The Son of Sam law was the city's first fix, and like every fix that would follow, it addressed the spectacle, not the structure. Case number 2, Joel Rifkin, the invisibility loop. If Berkowitz taught us that spectacle can paralyze a city, Joel Rifkin taught us something far more terrifying. Silence can bury it. Long Island, The southern edge of Queens, where the city bleeds into the suburbs, a 30-year-old landscaper with thick glasses and a receding hairline is driving a beat-up 1983 Mazda pickup truck with a blue camper shell through the streets of New York at 3 a.m. The truck has no license plate. The inspection sticker expired 2 years ago. The muffler is so loud it wakes up dogs on every block he passes. And inside that camper shell, wrapped in plastic tarps, garbage bags, and old blankets, are the bodies of women no one is looking for. How did he kill 17 women over 4 years without triggering a single task force? The answer is the second crack in the system, and it's going to make you angry. This is Joel Rifkin. To the world, he's a nobody, a loser, a 30-something failure who lives with his mother and sister in a house that smells like cat urine and old newspapers. To the NYPD, he's not even a blip on the radar. But to 17 women, he was the last face they ever saw. And he understood the most terrifying truth about New York. If you're boring enough, you're bulletproof. To understand Joe Rifkin, you have to understand the architecture of failure. He was adopted as an infant, raised in a middle-class home in East Meadow. His parents gave him every advantage: good schools, stable home, supportive environment, and he failed at everything. He was bullied mercilessly in school. Kids called him Turtle because he was slow and awkward. He had no friends, no girlfriends, no social circle. He barely graduated high school. He enrolled in community college and flunked out. He tried to start a landscaping business and went bankrupt. He lived in his mother's basement, surrounded by piles of junk and broken furniture. In criminal psychology, we call this accumulated inadequacy syndrome. Every failure compounds. Every rejection reinforces the belief that you are fundamentally unworthy of human connection. And for certain personalities, that inadequacy curdles into rage. But not the loud, explosive rage that gets you arrested for bar fights or domestic violence. The cold, patient rage that waits for the perfect opportunity. Rifkin kept mementos from every victim: driver's licenses, jewelry, underwear. He stored them in his bedroom, in the same house where his mother cooked him breakfast every morning. How did she not know? By 1989, Rifkin had found his hunting ground. The red light districts of the Bronx, Brooklyn, and Manhattan, Hunts Point, East New York, the stroll along 11th Avenue. He targeted sex workers. Why? Because he knew something the NYPD didn't want to admit. The city had a hierarchy of victims. If you were wealthy, white, and connected, your disappearance triggered a task force, a press conference, and a dedicated detective squad. If you were a sex worker from the Bronx, especially a black or Latina sex worker, your case got a file number, a 2-paragraph incident report, and a dusty shelf in a precinct basement. Rifkin didn't kill sex workers because he hated them. He chose them because he knew no one would look for them. He would cruise the strolls in his Mazda pickup truck. He'd offer money, the women would get in, and somewhere between the pickup and the destination, on a dark stretch of highway, in an industrial area, in the truck itself, he would strangle them. Not quickly, not efficiently. He would take his time. And then he would drive around the city for hours looking for the perfect disposal site. Sometimes the East River, sometimes the Pine Barrens of Long Island. He was a mobile graveyard for 4 years. Rifkin wasn't caught because of investigative genius. He operated freely because the NYPD had a 2-tier system of justice, one for victims who mattered and one for victims who didn't. Between 1989 and 1993, Joel Rifkin became the most efficient killer in New York history. 17 confirmed victims, but experts believe the real number is higher, possibly over 20. He didn't have a signature in the traditional sense. He didn't pose the bodies. He didn't leave messages. He didn't follow a consistent disposal pattern. His only consistency was inconsistency. Some bodies were found within days. Others weren't discovered for years. Some were intact. Others were dismembered. Some were in the water.
Some were buried in shallow graves. In criminal psychology, we call this adaptive predation. Rifkin was constantly evolving his methods to avoid creating a pattern that could be tracked. But here's the thing. The NYPD did notice a pattern. Multiple precincts were finding bodies of sex workers in their jurisdictions. The medical examiner's office documented similar causes of death, ligature strangulation, with evidence of prolonged manual pressure. But because the victims were classified as high-risk lifestyle, the cases weren't connected. Each precinct investigated independently. There was no central database, no cross-referencing, no task force. Why weren't the cases connected? We'll show you the internal NYPD memo that explains it, and it's gonna make you sick. Meanwhile, Joel Rifkin was living a double life that would have been impossible to maintain if anyone had been paying attention. Day by day, he worked as a landscaper doing yard work for suburban families. At night, he cruised the red light districts of New York looking for his next victim. And when he came home at 4 a.m. with dirt under his fingernails and scratches on his arms, his mother would ask, "Long day at work, Joel?" And he'd say, "Yeah, Ma, long day." And she'd make him breakfast. Rifkin's mother later testified that she had no idea her son was a serial killer, and the evidence suggests she was telling the truth because Rifkin was a master compartmentalizer. He kept his two lives completely separate. The trophies were hidden in boxes under his bed. The truck was always parked in the driveway, never in the garage where his mother might look inside. June 28, 1993, 3:15 a.m., the Southern State Parkway on Long Island. Two New York State troopers, Deborah Spargerin and Sean Ruin, are on routine patrol when they notice a green Mazda pickup truck with no rear license plate. Standard traffic stop. They hit the lights, the truck doesn't pull over. It accelerates. Why did Rifkin run? He'd been pulled over before and talked his way out of it. What was different this time? The chase lasts 20 minutes. Rifkin is driving erratically, weaving through traffic, blowing through red lights. The troopers are calling for backup, but they're in a weird jurisdictional zone where local PD and state police have overlapping authority. Finally, Rifkin loses control on a turn and crashes into a utility pole in Mineola. The troopers approach with weapons drawn, and then the smell hits them. It's not the smell of gasoline or burning rubber. It's the smell every veteran cop recognizes instantly: decomposition. They pull Rifkin out of the truck. He's not resisting. He's not saying anything. He just looks resigned. They open the camper shell. Inside, wrapped in a blue tarp, is the body of Tiffany Brestiani, 22 years old. She'd been reported missing by her family 3 days earlier, which made her different from most of Rifkin's victims, who had no family looking for them. She'd been strangled. Her body was in the early stages of decay, and Rifkin had been driving around with her in the back of his truck for 3 days, trying to figure out where to dump her. Rifkin ran because he knew this was the end. He'd been carrying a corpse around Long Island for 72 hours. He'd driven past police stations, through residential neighborhoods, to his landscaping jobs with a dead woman in the back of his truck. And he'd finally been caught, not through investigative genius, but through a missing license plate. This is the most chilling footage in the early 1990s crime archive. In the interrogation room at the Nassau County Police Department, Joel Rifkin doesn't ask for a lawyer. He doesn't demand his rights. He doesn't try to play the insanity card. He asks for a map. Watch the footage. He's sitting at a metal table, wearing his thick glasses, his hands folded in front of him like he's in a job interview. And he's speaking in a calm, helpful monotone, like he's explaining a landscaping project. "Detective, Joel, we found Tiffany in your truck. How many more are there?" Counting on his fingers, "I think it's 17. Let me check." "Yeah, 17. I can show you where they are. It's easier if I just show you." This is rationalized dehumanization. Rifkin doesn't see his crimes as tragedies. He sees them as completed tasks. He's not confessing out of remorse. He's unburdening himself of logistical data he's been carrying for 4 years. For 9 hours, Rifkin walks the detectives through his archive. He describes each victim by location, not by name. The one under the overpass, the one in the Pine Barrens, the one I put in the East River near the Williamsburg Bridge. He draws maps. He corrects himself when he gets details wrong. He even apologizes when he can't remember exactly where he dumped one of the bodies. Rifkin: I'm sorry, I know she's somewhere in that area, but it's been like 3 years, and there are a lot of industrial parks that look the same. The detectives were stunned, not because he's confessing, but because how
He's confessing. There's no emotion, no guilt, no recognition that he's talking about 17 human beings. He's talking about disposal logistics. One detective later said in an interview, it was like listening to an exterminator talk about where he'd laid traps. He was proud of how efficient he'd been. And then Rifkin says something that reveals the core of his psychology. I wanted you guys to know. I wanted someone to know how thorough I was. I was good at this. I was really good at this. After Rifkin's arrest, an internal NYPD review found that at least 8 different precincts had open investigations into murdered sex workers that matched Rifkin's MO. But because there was no centralized database for tracking murders across jurisdictions, and because the victims were classified as low priority, the cases were never connected. The memo concluded, departmental structure and resource allocation contributed to investigative failure. In other words, the system knew there was a serial killer. They just didn't care enough to find him. Joel Rifkin was sentenced to 203 years to life. He's currently 66 years old, sitting in Clinton Correctional Facility in upstate New York. He's eligible for parole in 2197. In the aftermath of his arrest, NYPD implemented what became known as the Rifkin Protocols, a centralized database for tracking murders and disappearances across jurisdictional lines, mandatory DNA collection from all violent crime scenes, a task force specifically dedicated to tracking patterns in murders of sex workers. On paper, it sounds like progress, but here's the crack the protocols didn't fix. The protocols created better tracking. They didn't create equal priority. Sex workers are still classified as high-risk victims, which means their cases still get fewer resources, less media attention, and lower clearance rates than other homicides. The city fixed the data problem. They didn't fix the value problem. And that distinction is why even today, serial killers targeting marginalized communities can operate longer than those targeting mainstream victims. Because while New York was implementing the Rifkin protocols, while criminologists were studying his case in textbooks, while the NYPD was congratulating itself for finally creating a centralized murder database, a man named Julio González was sitting in a Bronx apartment, drinking cheap rum and nursing a grudge against a woman who'd just broken up with him. And in his alcohol-soaked rage, he was about to prove that the most dangerous crack in the system wasn't the failure to track killers, it was the failure to enforce the rules that could have prevented the killing in the first place. Rifkin killed 17 people over 4 years. González killed 87 people in 6 minutes. And the only weapon he needed was $1's worth of gasoline and a city that valued profit over safety. Case number 3, Julio González, The Regulatory Loop. March 25, 1990, the Bronx, 3:15 a.m. Inside the Happy Land Social Club on Southern Boulevard, 87 people are dancing to reggaeton and merengue. The music is loud enough to shake the walls. The air is thick with cigarette smoke and cheap perfume. It's a Friday night, and for the Honduran and Dominican immigrants who make up most of the crowd, this is the one place in New York where they feel at home. Outside, a man is walking toward the club's entrance with a plastic container. His name is Julio González. He's 36 years old, Cuban immigrant, lamp factory worker, and 2 hours ago, he was thrown out of this same club for drunkenly harassing his ex-girlfriend, Lydia Feliciano, who works the coat check. He's coming back. Not to apologize, not to try again, to erase the entire building. How did $1 purchase 87 lives? The answer isn't just about González, it's about a regulatory system that had been warned repeatedly that this club was a death trap and chose to do nothing. If Berkowitz proved that media creates monsters and Rifkin proved that apathy enables them, González is about to prove something even darker. Bureaucracy kills faster than any individual ever could. To understand the Happy Land fire, you have to understand the psychology of what criminologists call disproportionate retaliation. Julio González was not a criminal mastermind. He wasn't a serial killer. He wasn't even particularly violent in New York standards. He was a nobody, a lamp factory worker who lived in a cramped apartment and spent most of his paycheck on cheap rum. The only thing that gave his life meaning was Lydia Feliciano. They dated for 2 years, and when Lydia finally ended the relationship, citing his drinking, his jealousy, his volatile nature, something in González's ego fractured. In criminal psychology, we analyze this as narcissistic collapse. For individuals whose entire self-worth is tied to external validation, particularly romantic validation, rejection isn't just painful, it's annihilating. González didn't just lose a girlfriend, he lost his reason for existing. And on the night of March 25th, he went to Happy Land, drunk, desperate, and looking for one more chance. The club was packed, wall-to-wall bodies. Lydia was working the coat check near the entrance. González pushed his way through the crowd, grabbed her arm, and demanded she leave with him. She refused. He got louder, more aggressive. The bouncer, a man named Jose Mojica, intervened. Words were exchanged, and then Mojica physically threw González out onto the street. Imagine the humiliation. You're drunk, you're desperate, you just got rejected by the only person you care about, and now you're being thrown out of a club in front of that person by another man who's bigger and stronger than you? For most people, that's where the story ends. You go home, you cry, you drink more, you wake up hungover and embarrassed. But for González, standing on that Bronx sidewalk at 3:15 a.m., something else happened. He looked back at the club, the music, the lights, the laughter, and he didn't see 87 human beings. He saw a monument to his own failure, and he decided to burn it down. González walked 3 blocks to a Bronx Shell station. He had exactly $1.50 in his pocket. He bought $1 worth of gasoline in a small plastic container, and then he walked back to Happy Land. Why did 87 people die from a single dollar fire? Because Happy Land wasn't just dangerous, it was a death trap by design, and the city knew it. At 3:40 a.m., while the music was at its peak, González poured the gasoline into the club's only entrance, a narrow hallway at the bottom of a flight of stairs. He struck a match, and in less than 60 seconds, Happy Land became a furnace. Here's what happened according to fire marshal reports. The gasoline ignited immediately, creating a flash fire that consumed all the oxygen in the entrance hallway. The flames didn't spread throughout the club. They didn't need to, because Happy Land had no windows, no fire exits, no secondary stairwell, no sprinkler system, no emergency lighting. The club was on the 2nd floor of a converted warehouse. The only way in was the front entrance. The only way out was the front entrance. And González had turned the front entrance into a chimney. The fire created what's called the stack effect.
hot air and toxic smoke rising rapidly up the stairwell and into the main room. Within 90 seconds, the dance floor was filled with superheated smoke. Within 3 minutes, the carbon monoxide levels were lethal. The people in the back of the club, the ones farthest from the entrance, never even saw the flames. They just stopped breathing. Some died standing up, still holding drinks. Others tried to claw through the walls, looking for an exit that didn't exist. A few made it to the windows, which were sealed shut with cinder blocks and metal grates to prevent break-ins. The fire department arrived within 6 minutes, but by then it was over. 87 people dead, most of them between the ages of 18 and 30, most of them immigrants from Honduras, Guatemala, the Dominican Republic, people who'd come to New York looking for safety, for opportunity, for a better life. And they died in a club that had been cited for fire code violations dozens of times. Here's the part that will make you sick. Happyland had been inspected by the New York City Fire Department multiple times between 1988 and 1990. Inspectors documented no sprinklers, no secondary exit, illegal occupancy levels, blocked emergency routes, and every time the club was issued a violation notice and then allowed to keep operating while the appeals process dragged on, because shutting down an illegal club required manpower, bureaucracy, lawyers, court time. So the city did what it always does. It filed the complaints and forgot about them. Julio González went home after the fire. He went to bed. When the police arrived at his apartment 6 hours later, he answered the door in his underwear, annoyed that they'd woken him up. In the interrogation room at the 48th precinct, his behavior was a study of narcissistic deflection. Watch the footage. He's not asking how many people died. He's not asking if Lydia survived. He's complaining that the police interrupted his sleep. Detective, Julio, do you know what you did? 87 people are dead. González, shrugging. They shouldn't have thrown me out. I told them I'd be back. I just wanted to scare them. If they died, it's because the club was too small. It's not my fault the building was a trap. This is blame displacement. González is attempting to transfer moral responsibility from his actions to the building's design. And here's the sick irony. The building was a trap. The city did allow it to operate illegally, but that doesn't absolve him of setting the fire. He never expressed remorse, never asked about Lydia, never acknowledged the magnitude of what he had done. Because in his mind, he was the victim. He'd been rejected, humiliated, thrown out, and the fire was just his way of evening the score. González was sentenced to 25 years to life for each of the 87 victims, sentences to run consecutively. That's technically 2,175 years, but New York law capped it at a maximum of 4,350 years. He served 26 years in Clinton Correctional Facility. He never showed remorse, never offered an apology, never even acknowledged Lydia's name in any interview. He died of a heart attack in September 2016, age 62. And New York created the Social Club Task Force, a citywide crackdown that shut down over 4,000 illegal clubs within 2 years. On paper, it sounds like justice, but here's the crack the task force didn't fix. The city shut down the clubs. They didn't reform the regulatory system that had allowed those clubs to operate illegally for years. They didn't create a fast-track enforcement mechanism. They didn't hold the inspectors or bureaucrats accountable for ignoring violations. They just shut down the clubs and moved the problem somewhere else. Because here's what actually happened. After the Social Club Task Force, illegal venues didn't disappear. They just moved underground. They became more secretive, harder to find, harder to inspect, which meant that when the next fire happened, and there was a next fire at an illegal warehouse party in Oakland in 2016 that killed 36 people, the same regulatory failures were in play. The city had learned, once again, to treat the symptom instead of the disease. And while New York was congratulating itself for shutting down illegal clubs, while fire marshals were holding press conferences about never again, while the families of the 87 victims were burying their dead, a soft-spoken nurse named Charles Cullen was walking into his 4th hospital, and no one
was checking his employment history. González killed 87 people with $1 and a match, but he couldn't have done it without a system that valued procedure over protection. Cullen is about to prove that the most dangerous predators aren't the ones who work outside the system, they're the ones who work inside it.
Case 4. Charles Cullen.
If González proved that bureaucracy can be as lethal as malice, Charles Cullen is about to prove something even more insidious. Institutions will protect their reputation over your life. 1988 to 2003, 16 years, 9 hospitals, 400 estimated victims. How did the most prolific serial killer in American history work in healthcare for 16 years without being stopped? The answer is the 4th crack in the system, and it's the one that should terrify you the most. This is Charles Cullen, nurse, soft-spoken, thin, wire-rimmed glasses, the kind of person you'd want sitting next to your hospital bed at 3 a.m., checking your IV, adjusting your pillow, telling you everything's going to be okay. And for 16 years, he sat next to hundreds of beds with a syringe full of digoxin, insulin, or epinephrine. He didn't slip through the cracks. He was deliberately passed from crack to crack, because every hospital that employed him knew something was wrong. They just valued their liability more than your life. To understand Charles Cullen, you have to understand the psychology of the omnipotence addict. Cullen wasn't motivated by rage like González. He wasn't seeking attention like Berkowitz. He wasn't compensating for feelings of inadequacy like Rifkin. He was motivated by power, specifically the power to decide who lives and who dies. In forensic psychology, we call this the malignant God complex. It's different from the benign God complex you see in surgeons or pilots, the belief that you have special skills that give you control over life and death. Cullen's version was darker. He didn't want to save lives, he wanted to end them, and then watch the doctors scramble to save them, and then stand in the back of the room, pretending to be concerned while the patient he'd just poisoned flatlined. Think about what that means. You're lying in a hospital bed. You're vulnerable, sick, afraid, and the person you trust most, the nurse who brings you water, who answers your call button, who reassures you at 2 a.m., is the person who's killing you. Cullen's weapon of choice was digoxin. It's a heart medication derived from the foxglove plant. In the right dose, it regulates irregular heartbeats. In the wrong dose, it triggers a catastrophic arrhythmia that looks exactly like a natural cardiac arrest. And the beautiful thing, from Cullen's perspective, was that elderly patients in ICUs die of cardiac events all the time. It's expected, it's normal, which meant Cullen could kill 5 patients in a week, and the hospital would just chalk it up to natural causes. But here's the thing that separates Cullen from other medical serial killers. His victims weren't all terminal. Many of them were recovering. They were talking to their families, making plans to go home, looking forward to grandchildren's birthdays, and Cullen would walk into their rooms, inject them with a lethal dose, and watch them die. Why? Because he wasn't showing mercy. He was feeding an addiction. What was Cullen addicted to? Not the killing itself, the aftermath. We'll explain in the interrogation section. Here's the crack that allowed Charles Cullen to kill for 16 years. Every time a suspicious death occurred on his shift, and there were dozens of suspicious deaths, the hospital wouldn't investigate. They just let him resign. Why? Because investigating meant liability. It meant lawsuits. It meant admitting that a predator had been working in their ICU for months, killing patients while collecting a paycheck. It meant negative press. It meant potential criminal charges for negligent supervision. So instead of investigating, hospitals developed a strategy. Notice the pattern of deaths on Cullen's shifts. Quietly confront him or make his work environment uncomfortable. Accept his resignation, write him a neutral reference letter, and pass him to the next hospital. It's called passing the trash in healthcare administration. Here's Cullen's employment history. St. Barnabas Medical Center, New Jersey, 1987 to 1988. Multiple suspicious deaths. Allowed to resign. Neutral reference. Warren Hospital, New Jersey, 1988. Caught stealing medication. Allowed to resign. Neutral reference. Hunterdon Medical Center, New Jersey, 1989 to 1992. Patient dies after Cullen injects unauthorized drugs. Allowed to resign. Neutral reference. Morriston Memorial Hospital, New Jersey, 1992 to 1993. Overdoses and suspicious deaths. Allowed to resign. Neutral reference. Liberty Nursing and Rehabilitation Center, Pennsylvania, 1993 to 1996. Multiple patient deaths. Allowed to resign. Neutral reference. Easton Hospital, Pennsylvania, 1998 to 2001. Suspicious deaths. Allowed to resign. Neutral reference. Lehigh Valley Hospital, Pennsylvania, 2001 to 2002. Suspicious deaths. Allowed to resign. Neutral reference. St. Luke's Hospital, Pennsylvania, 2002. Suspicious deaths. Allowed to resign. Neutral reference. Somerset Medical Center, New Jersey, 2002 to 2003. Finally caught. 9 hospitals, 16 years, and every single one of them knew. Cullen didn't evade the system. The system protected him to protect itself. Because every hospital that reported him would also have to admit they'd employed him despite warning signs. So instead, they passed him along like a bad loan, knowing that eventually he'd become someone else's problem. The crack finally closed in 2003, not because of a hospital investigation, not because of police work, because of a colleague. Amy Lugren was a nurse at Somerset Medical Center. She considered Charles Cullen a friend. They'd worked the same shifts for months. He was quiet, helpful, a little awkward, but harmless. Until Amy started noticing something strange. Patients were dying on Cullen's shifts at unusually high rates, and when she checked the Pixie logs, the computerized medication dispensing system, she saw that Cullen was accessing medications he shouldn't need. He was pulling digoxin for patients who weren't prescribed digoxin. He was pulling insulin for non-diabetic patients. He was accessing medications for patients he wasn't even assigned to. Amy went to the hospital administration. They brushed her off. So she went to the police. And the police asked her to do something that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Wear a wire. For 3 weeks, Amy wore a recording device and tried to get Cullen to confess. She'd invite him to dinner, to the movies. She'd asked casual questions about the deaths. And slowly, carefully, Cullen started to crack. In a diner in Somerville, New Jersey, with a wire hidden under her shirt, Amy looked Cullen in the eye and asked, "Charlie, did you hurt those people?" And Cullen, believing he was finally being seen by someone who understood him, smiled and said, "I was just trying to help them. They were suffering. I was trying to end their suffering." Cullen wasn't addicted to killing. He was addicted to being needed in the aftermath. He loved the moment when the code blue alarm went off and everyone rushed to the room. He loved standing in the corner, pretending to be helpful, while the doctors tried to save a life he'd already extinguished. He loved the moment when he comforted the families afterward. He was addicted to the performance of mercy. On December 12, 2003, Charles Cullen was arrested in the parking lot of a New Jersey restaurant. In his confession, he admitted to killing 40 patients, but the investigators believe the real number is over 400. Why the discrepancy? Because Cullen operated for so long across so many hospitals that the medical records are incomplete. Some hospitals destroyed records, others can't separate natural deaths from suspicious ones. We'll never know the true body count. In 2006, Cullen was sentenced to 11 consecutive life terms. He's currently 65 years old, sitting in the hospital wing of New Jersey State Prison. And after his arrest, New Jersey and Pennsylvania passed the Cullen laws. Hospitals must report suspicious employee behavior to state medical boards. Healthcare facilities must share employment records with prospective employers. Resignation under investigation must be flagged in background checks. On paper, it sounds like progress, but here's the crack the laws didn't fix. The Cullen laws only apply to healthcare facilities. They don't apply to private practices, nursing homes, or home healthcare agencies, which means the passing the trash problem still exists. It's just moved to a different sector. And here's the even bigger problem. The laws rely on voluntary reporting. There's no enforcement mechanism, no penalties for hospitals that fail to report, no independent oversight. Which means that even
Healthcare facilities can and do quietly fire problem employees and pass them along to the next facility. Because the institutional instinct to protect reputation is stronger than the legal requirement to protect patients. Cullen killed for 16 years because institutions valued liability over lives. Our next case proves that privilege operates the same way. That in New York, wealth doesn't just buy better lawyers, it buys a different version of justice entirely.
Case number 5. Robert Chambers, The Privilege Loop.
If Cullen proved that institutions will protect themselves at any cost, Robert Chambers is about to prove that in New York, privilege is a get-out-of-jail-free card. August 26, 1986, Central Park, 5:30 a.m. A cyclist is riding through the park behind the Metropolitan Museum of Art when he sees something in the grass. At first, he thinks it's a mannequin. The body is too still, too posed. But then he gets closer. It's an 18-year-old woman. Her name is Jennifer Levin. She's lying on her back. Her skirt is pulled up. Her bra is torn, and her neck has been crushed with such force that her hyoid bone, a small horseshoe-shaped bone in the throat, has been shattered into pieces. She's been strangled to death. How did her killer serve only 15 years for murder? The answer is the fifth crack in the system, and it's the one that will make you question whether justice in New York is truly blind. The NYPD canvasses the area. They interview Jennifer's friends, and within 24 hours, they have a suspect. Robert Chambers, 6'4", handsome, a graduate of elite prep schools, the son of a wealthy Upper East Side family. And when the police bring him in for questioning, he doesn't deny being in the park with Jennifer. He just denies the intent. To understand Robert Chambers, you have to understand the psychology of socioeconomic shielding. Chambers came from the world of the Upper East Side, Choate Rosemary Hall, exclusive prep schools, country clubs, a universe where consequences were things that happened to other people.
His father was absent, his mother was overbearing and enabling, and Chambers grew up with the belief that he was special, that the rules didn't apply to him, that his status, his looks, his education, his connections made him untouchable. In criminal psychology, we call this narcissistic entitlement syndrome, the belief that your inherent superiority exempts you from moral and legal accountability. Chambers had been committing crimes for years: theft, drug dealing. He'd stolen from his own family, from his prep school roommates, from employers. But every time he got caught, someone, his mother, a teacher, a family friend, would intervene. He never faced real consequences, and that taught him the most dangerous lesson a narcissist can learn. I can get away with anything. On the night of August 25, 1986, Chambers met Jennifer Levin at Dorian's Red Hand, a chic Upper East Side bar where wealthy teenagers used fake IDs to drink. Jennifer was vibrant, well-liked, part of the same social circle. They left the bar together around 3 a.m. They walked into Central Park, and at some point, exactly when and why remains disputed, Chambers strangled her to death. When the police interviewed him, Chambers had scratches all over his face and arms. His story kept changing. First, he said he hadn't seen Jennifer that night. Then, he admitted they'd been in the park, but claimed she'd left alive. Finally, when confronted with forensic evidence, he told a story that would become infamous: the rough sex defense. Chambers claimed that Jennifer had tied his hands with her own underwear during consensual sex, that she was sexually aggressive, that he'd accidentally killed her while trying to free himself from her grip. It was a lie, and it was a calculated lie, because Chambers understood something about 1986 America. Victim blaming worked. Slut-shaming worked. If he could paint Jennifer as the aggressor, as a girl who was asking for it, he could turn a murder charge into an accident. And it almost worked. But then, the prosecution found a piece of evidence that shattered Chambers' mask: a home video, filmed at a party in November 1986, while Chambers was out on bail for murder. In the video, Chambers is wearing a tuxedo. He's surrounded by friends, other wealthy prep school kids, laughing and drinking, and someone hands him a Barbie doll. Chambers looks at the camera, smiles, and violently twists the doll's head off. Then he tosses the head aside and laughs. The room erupts in laughter. The accident defense evaporated in that moment, because you don't joke about an accident. You don't mock the victim of an accident. You joke about a victory. When the video was played in court, the prosecutor asked the jury a simple question: does this look like a man who feels remorse? But here's where the privilege crack becomes undeniable. Despite the video, despite the forensic evidence, despite Chambers' constant changing story, the jury was deadlocked. They couldn't agree on a murder conviction. Why? Because Chambers looked like their sons. They looked like their neighbors. They looked like someone who made a mistake, not someone who belonged in prison. So what happened? How did a man with overwhelming evidence against him avoid a murder conviction? Faced with a hung jury, the prosecution offered Chambers a deal: plead guilty to first-degree manslaughter, serve 5 to 15 years. Chambers took it. He was sentenced in 1988. He served the full 15 years, not because he was a model prisoner, but because he kept violating parole rules. And in 2003, when he was released, New York threw him a parade. Just kidding. He was arrested within 4 years. This time for running a cocaine-dealing operation out of his Upper East Side apartment. Not small-time dealing, a full operation, selling to Wall Street traders, trust fund kids, the same crowd he'd grown up with. He was caught in a sting operation, on video, measuring out grams of cocaine on a digital scale. He got another 19 years. The plea deal was the system's way of avoiding a public trial that would have exposed how many times Chambers had been given second chances before Jennifer's murder. It was damage control, disguised as justice. And here's the most revealing part. Even after serving 15 years for killing Jennifer, even after being caught on video dealing cocaine, Chambers still maintained that he was the victim. In prison interviews, he complained about the media witch hunt. He claimed Jennifer's death was a tragic accident. He said the cocaine charges were entrapment. He never once said her name with remorse. Because the privilege crack doesn't just protect you from consequences, it protects you from self-awareness. Robert Chambers is currently 58 years old. He's eligible for parole in 2024. His case changed very little about how the justice system handles wealthy defendants. There were no new laws, no reforms, no Chambers protocols, because the system wasn't broken from the perspective of people like Chambers. It was working exactly as designed. We're now 5 cases deep, 5 different cracks, and you're starting to see the pattern, aren't you? The media enables killers, the bureaucracy ignores them, the institutions protect them, and privilege shields them from consequences. But there's one more crack we haven't explored yet, the one that happens when the system doesn't just fail to stop killers, but actively recruits them. Because while Robert Chambers was serving his manslaughter sentence, while his wealthy friends were writing letters to the parole board on his behalf, while the tabloids were debating whether the Preppy killer deserved sympathy, 2 NYPD detectives in Brooklyn were on the payroll of the Lucchese crime family, using their badges to commit murders for hire. Chambers proved that privilege corrupts justice, but our next case proves something darker, that the badge itself can be the ultimate disguise for evil.
Case 6, Caracappa and Eppolito. If Chambers proved that wealth corrupts justice, Stephen Caracappa and Louis Eppolito are about to prove that authority is the ultimate disguise. 1986 to 1992, Brooklyn, the 63rd Precinct. 2 NYPD detectives, both highly decorated, both with spotless records, are moonlighting as professional assassins for the Lucchese crime family. They're not just taking bribes, they're not just looking the other way. They're taking contracts. They're using NYPD databases to find targets. They're conducting hits in police vehicles. They're using their badges to pull over victims, then executing them on the side of the road. How did 2 decorated officers commit at least 8 murders without anyone noticing? The answer is the 6th crack in the system, and it's the one that should make you question every traffic stop you've ever been pulled over for. This is Stephen Caracappa and Louis Eppolito, and they understood the most terrifying truth about law enforcement. The badge doesn't just grant authority, it grants invisibility. To understand the Mafia cops, you have to understand Louis Eppolito's family tree. His father was Ralph Eppolito, a soldier in the Gambino crime family. His uncle was James "Jimmy the Clam" Eppolito, a capo. His cousin was involved in loan sharking. Louis grew up in this world. Sunday dinners with mobsters, envelopes of cash changing hands, the code of silence, the belief that the real law wasn't in the courtroom, it was in the social hierarchy of the 5 families. And then Louis became a cop, not to escape the mob, to exploit it. In criminal psychology, we call this bicultural loyalty syndrome. Eppolito didn't see a conflict between being a cop and being connected to the mob. He saw it as a tactical advantage.
His partner, Stephen Caracappa, was different. He didn't come from a mob family. He was a Marine Corps veteran, a straight arrow. He rose through the ranks legitimately. But somewhere along the way, probably around the mid-1980s when his marriage fell apart and his finances collapsed, Caracappa made a choice. If the system won't reward me for being good, maybe I should get paid for being bad. These weren't corrupt beat cops taking bribes to ignore parking tickets. These were elite detectives in the NYPD Organized Crime Homicide Unit. Caracappa literally created the unit designed to investigate mob murders, which meant he had access to every witness, every informant, every undercover operation. By 1986, both detectives were on the payroll of Lucchese underboss Anthony Gaspipe Casso, $4,000 a month, split between them. And the services they provided weren't just intelligence, they were wet work. November 6, 1990, 11 p.m., the Belt Parkway near Mill Basin, Brooklyn. Eddie Leno, a captain in the Gambino crime family, is driving his black Mercedes home from a meeting in Manhattan. In his rearview mirror, he sees the flashing lights of a police cruiser. He's not worried. He's a made man. He has lawyers. He knows the routine. He pulls over. Two plainclothes detectives approach the car. They're wearing NYPD windbreakers. They have badges clipped to their belts. Eddie rolls down his window to ask what the problem is, and the detectives open fire. This is instrumental predation. Caracappa and Eppolito used their authority as bait. The badge wasn't just their disguise, it was their weapon. Because who runs from a cop? Who refuses to roll down their window when a cop asks you to? Eddie Leno died in the driver's seat of his Mercedes, believing he was being questioned by the law. The detectives collected $75,000 from the Lucchese family for that hit. They split it and went back to the precinct for their regular shift the next day. This wasn't their first hit, and it wouldn't be their last. Between 1986 and 1992, Caracappa and Eppolito were involved in at least 8 murders. Israel Greenwald, 1986, diamond dealer, kidnapped, executed, buried in a pit of lie. They used a fake arrest to take him into custody. Jimmy Heidel, Gambino associate, delivered to Gaspipe Casso, who tortured and killed him. Anthony DeLappy, Lucchese associate, shot in the parking lot of a motel. The detectives provided his location. Bruno Facciola, Lucchese soldier suspected of being an informant. The detectives confirmed he was cooperating with the FBI, then helped kill him. Eddie Leno, the Belt Parkway execution. And those are just the confirmed cases. Investigators believe there are more. The crack wasn't that Caracappa and Eppolito were corrupt. It's that the NYPD had no system to detect corruption within its own elite units. Internal affairs was focused on beat cops taking bribes, not decorated detectives moonlighting as assassins. So how did they get caught? Not through internal affairs, not through an investigation, through a mobster who flipped. In the late 1990s, the federal government arrested multiple Lucchese family members. Some of them took plea deals, and in their cooperation agreements, they mentioned 2 NYPD detectives on the payroll. But even then, it took years to build a case, because Caracappa and Eppolito had retired. They'd moved to Las Vegas, and Eppolito had done something that gave him an alibi for years. He'd become famous. After retiring from the NYPD in 1990, Eppolito moved to Hollywood. He wrote a book called Mafia Cop, claiming he was the honest son of a mobster who dedicated his life to fighting organized crime. He got small acting roles. He appeared in Goodfellas, Lost Highway, Predator 2. He did interviews on talk shows, playing the role of the tough but honest Brooklyn cop who'd escaped the mob. It was all a lie, but it was a good lie. In criminal psychology, we call this public performance as alibi. Eppolito understood that if he was famous enough, visible enough, the idea that he was secretly a mob hitman would seem absurd. And it worked for over a decade. Finally, in March 2005, the FBI arrested both men in Las Vegas. The evidence was overwhelming. Testimony from multiple mob informants, financial records showing unexplained income, forensic evidence linking them to the Greenwald burial site. In 2006, they were convicted of 8 murders and sentenced to life without parole. Louis Eppolito died in prison in 2019. Stephen Caracappa died in 2017. After the Mafia cops scandal, the NYPD implemented a total forensic audit of internal affairs and created new protocols for monitoring elite detective units. On paper, it sounds like reform. But here's the crack the audit didn't fix. The audit focused on financial irregularities and outside income. It didn't address the deeper problem, the culture of silence that allows corrupt cops to operate for years without being reported by their colleagues. Because here's what the investigation revealed. Multiple officers in the 63rd Precinct suspected something was wrong with Caracappa and Eppolito. They noticed the expensive cars, the unexplained absences, the way certain mob-related cases seemed to go nowhere. But nobody reported it. Why? Because of the blue wall of silence, the unwritten rule that you don't rat on a fellow cop, ever. And that wall, that cultural norm, is stronger than any audit, any reform, any protocol. Which means that even today, corrupt officers can operate for years, as long as they're careful, as long as they don't get too greedy, and as long as their fellow officers choose loyalty over accountability. We're 6 cases deep now, 6 cracks in the system: media enablement, bureaucratic apathy, institutional self-protection, privilege as shield, authority as disguise, and now we're going back in time to show you that these cracks aren't new. They've been there from the beginning.
Case 7. Ruth Snyder. We're going back now to 1927, the Jazz Age, Prohibition, flappers, speakeasies, a time when New York was obsessed with spectacle, with celebrity, with turning real tragedies into entertainment. March 20th, 1927, Queens Village, a quiet suburban street. A 32-year-old housewife named Ruth Snyder and her lover, a weak-willed corset salesman named Judd Gray, sneak into her home at 2 a.m. They creep into the bedroom where Ruth's husband, Albert, is sleeping, and they murder him with a sash cord, a window weight, and chloroform. Then Ruth stages the scene to look like a burglary. She ties herself up loosely, hides her jewelry under the mattress, and waits for the police to discover her. How did Ruth Snyder's case change American media forever? The answer is the 7th crack, and it involves the most controversial photograph in execution history. This is Ruth Snyder, and she's about to become the first media serial killer, not because she killed serially, but because the media turned her trial and execution into a serialized event that obsessed the nation for over a year. Ruth Snyder was bored. That's it. That's the motive. She was 32 years old, married to a magazine editor who preferred gardening to nightclubs. She lived in a modest house in Queens. She had a daughter, a comfortable, boring, middle-class life, and she wanted more. In criminal psychology, we call this lifestyle frustration homicide. Ruth didn't kill Albert because he was abusive. She killed him because he was boring. She wanted the furs, the champagne, the excitement of Manhattan, and Albert was an obstacle to that life. So she started an affair with Judd Gray, a traveling salesman she'd met at a restaurant, and together they hatched a plan. First, Ruth took out a $48,000 life insurance policy on Albert, including a double indemnity clause, meaning if he died by accident or violence, the payout doubled to $96,000.
That's nearly $1.7 million in today's money. Ruth was literally betting that she could get away with murder and retire rich. On the night of March 19, 1927, Ruth snuck Judd into the house after Albert went to bed. They'd been planning this for months, rehearsing, practicing, and yet when the moment came, they botched it completely. They tried to chloroform Albert, but used too little. He woke up fighting. They hit him with a window weight, but he kept moving. They strangled him with a sash cord, and finally, he stopped struggling. Then Ruth staged the burglary, but here's where her narcissism betrayed her. She tied herself up so loosely that the knots fell off when the police arrived. She claimed the burglars had stolen her jewelry, but the jewelry was hidden under her mattress. She said the intruders were Italian men, but couldn't describe them. The police saw through it immediately. The trial of Ruth Snyder became the first viral media event in American history. Over 1,500 people fought for seats in the courtroom every day. The New York tabloids, the Daily News, the Mirror, the Evening Graphic ran front-page coverage with lurid headlines: Ruthless Ruth, the Marble Woman, the Bloody Blonde. They published crime scene photos, autopsy details. They even ran illustrations of the murder reenacted by actors. The trial wasn't about justice, it was entertainment. And Ruth played her part. She wore black dresses, pearl necklaces. She dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief, but never actually cried. The tabloids called her the Marble Woman because she seemed emotionally cold. But here's the crack in the system that this case revealed. The media coverage didn't just report the trial, it influenced it. Jurors who were supposed to be impartial were reading front-page speculation about Ruth's guilt every morning. The judge was giving quotes to reporters between sessions. The entire process was contaminated by spectacle. Ruth and Judd were both convicted, both sentenced to death in the electric chair at Sing Sing prison. And then, the media did something that would change American law forever. January 12, 1928, Sing Sing prison, 11 p.m. Ruth Snyder is strapped into the electric chair. The warden reads the death warrant. The executioner waits for the signal. And in the witness gallery, a photographer for the New York Daily News, Tom Howard, has a miniature camera strapped to his ankle, hidden under his pants. The moment the current hits Ruth's body, Howard lifts his leg and clicks the shutter. The next morning, the photo is on the front page of every newspaper in America. A blurry, grainy image of Ruth Snyder dying in the electric chair. Her body straining against the straps, the leather hood over her face, the headline, "Dead." Think about that. The state of New York executed a woman, and the media sold it as entertainment. They turned death into a commodity. The photo sparked outrage, debates about privacy, ethics, the role of the press. And New York eventually passed laws banning hidden cameras in execution chambers, but they didn't ban the spectacle. We are 7 cases in, and the pattern is undeniable now. Every fix addresses the symptom, never the disease. The city keeps trying to control the visibility of evil, never the conditions that create it. Because while New York was debating execution photos, a man named Bernie Goetz was being mugged on a Manhattan street and internalizing a rage that would explode 7 years later on a subway train.
Case 8. Bernie Goetz, The Fear Loop. December 22, 1984, Saturday afternoon, 1:30 p.m. A number 2 subway train is heading south through Manhattan. It's crowded but not packed. Holiday shoppers, families, the usual weekend crowd. At 14th Street, 4 teenagers board the train. Barry Allen, Troy Canty, Darrell Caby, James Ramseur.
They're carrying sharpened screwdrivers in their jacket pockets. They're professional harassers. They target passengers who look weak, scared, easy. And then they see him. A thin, pale man in his late 30s, wire-rimmed glasses, wearing a windbreaker, sitting alone. He looks like an accountant, a nobody. One of the teenagers walks over and says, "Give me $5. Not a request, a demand. And the thin man reaches into his jacket, but he's not reaching for his wallet. He's reaching for a .38 caliber Smith & Wesson revolver. And in the next 5 seconds, he fires 5 shots in rapid succession, hitting all 4 teenagers. Then he looks at Darrell Cabey slumped in his seat and says, "You look all right. Here's another," and fires the 5th bullet into Cabey's spine, paralyzing him for life. Was Bernie Goetz a hero who fought back, or a predator who went hunting? The answer is the 8th crack, and it's the one that divided New York in half. This is Bernie Goetz, and for 9 days he was the most wanted man in America. And for 9 days after that, he was the most celebrated. To understand Bernie Goetz, you have to understand what New York did to him 3 years earlier. Goetz was mugged in the Canal Street subway station. 3 men jumped him, beat him, stole his electronics equipment. He reported it to the police. They caught the attackers, and then the system failed him. The DA offered the muggers a plea deal, minimal jail time. They were back on the streets within months. Meanwhile, Goetz was traumatized, afraid to take the subway, afraid to walk alone at night. He applied for a gun permit. The NYPD denied him, said he hadn't demonstrated proper cause. So he bought a gun illegally in Florida and brought it back to New York. And for 3 years, he carried that gun every day, waiting. Not waiting to be mugged again, waiting for the justification to use it. This is the psychology of accumulated trauma. Goetz didn't just fear another mugging, he'd internalized the belief that the system wouldn't protect him, that he was on his own, that the only justice he'd get was the justice he created himself. And on December 22nd, 1984, when those 4 teenagers approached him on the subway, Goetz didn't see a shakedown, he saw an opportunity. For 9 days after the shooting, Bernie Goetz was a ghost. He fled the city, drove to New England, stayed in cheap motels, watched the news coverage, and what he saw shocked him. The tabloids were calling him a hero, the subway avenger, the vigilante strikes back. Finally, someone fights back. New Yorkers were celebrating, calling radio shows to praise the unknown shooter, saying things like, "I wish I'd been there to shake his hand." Because by 1984, New York was exhausted by crime. The subways were dangerous, the murder rate was climbing, and people felt abandoned by a system that seemed more interested in protecting criminals' rights than victims' safety. Goetz became a symbol of that frustration. So why did he turn himself in? The answer reveals something crucial about his psychology. On New Year's Eve, 1984, Goetz walked into a police station in Concord, New Hampshire. He said, "I'm the person you're looking for in New York. I'm the subway shooter." Why? Not because of guilt, because of pride. Goetz wanted the credit. He wanted to be seen. He wanted the world to know that he, the victim, the nobody, the man the system had failed, had fought back and won. In the NYPD interrogation room, Bernie Goetz didn't act like a man who just confessed to attempted murder. He acted like a man giving a lecture. Watch the footage. He's calm, analytical. He speaks in a flat, nasal tone, describing the shooting like he's explaining a math problem. "Detective, Bernie, did you want to kill them, all 4 of them?" "Goetz, my intention was to murder them, to do anything I could to hurt them. I wanted to kill them all. I would have gouged their eyes out if I could have. They were savages."
This isn't remorse, this is ideological justification. Goetz sees those 4 teenagers not as human beings, but as symbols of everything he hated about New York. And the racial subtext was impossible to ignore. The 4 teenagers were black, Goetz was white. The case became a proxy battle for every tension simmering in 1980s New York: race, class, crime, fear. The trial of Bernie Goetz was the most polarizing event in New York since the Son of Sam. The prosecution argued this was premeditated murder. Goetz had carried a gun for 3 years, waiting for an excuse to use it. The defense argued this was self-defense. 4 threatening teenagers approached him. He had a right to protect himself. The jury, reflecting the fear and frustration of 1980s New York, acquitted Goetz of attempted murder. He was convicted only of illegal weapons possession. He served 8 months in jail. The verdict sent a clear message. In New York, if you're scared enough, violence is justified. The city had validated vigilantism, and that validation created a new crack in the system. It told would-be vigilantes that if you can frame your violence as fear-based, you can get away with it. Goetz proved that fear can be weaponized, that trauma can be turned into justification. And while New York was debating whether he was a hero or a monster, another predator was operating in the shadows of Times Square, using the city's apathy towards sex workers to kill for more than a decade.
Case number 9, Richard Cottingham. December 2nd, 1979, Times Square. The Travelodge on West 42nd Street. Firefighters respond to a fire alarm on the 4th floor, room 417. When they break down the door, they find a scene that will haunt the NYPD for decades. 2 women lying on separate beds. But they're incomplete. The killer had decapitated both victims, removed their hands, set the room on fire, and then walked out of the hotel carrying their heads and hands in a bag through the crowded lobby of a midtown hotel. How did Richard Cottingham kill over 100 women across 13 years without anyone connecting the cases? The answer is the 9th crack. And it's the one that explains why marginalized victims are the perfect targets for serial predators. This is Richard Cottingham, computer operator for Blue Cross Blue Shield, husband, father of 3, suburban commuter from Lodi, New Jersey, and the most prolific serial killer in New York history. Richard Cottingham lived 2 completely separate lives. Life number 1, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, he was a computer operator in Midtown Manhattan. He wore a suit. He was quiet, professional, unremarkable. He commuted home every night to his wife and kids in New Jersey. Life number 2, nights and weekends, he prowled the red light districts of Times Square and the West Side Highway looking for sex workers. In criminal psychology, we call this adaptive compartmentalization. Cottingham didn't have a snap or a breaking point. He had a schedule. Think about what that means. He'd strangle a woman in Midtown Manhattan, dismember her body, set the room on fire, go home, kiss his kids goodnight, and wake up the next morning to make breakfast. He targeted sex workers for the same reason Rifkin did, because he knew the NYPD wouldn't prioritize their cases. And he was right. Between 1967 and 1980, Cottingham killed an estimated 100 women. We only know about 11 confirmed cases because those are the only ones with enough evidence to prosecute. The rest? Missing, unsolved, filed away in precinct basements. Cottingham wasn't invisible because he was brilliant. He was invisible because the system didn't look for him. The NYPD had a policy, never officially stated but universally understood, that murders of sex workers were low priority. They got minimal resources, minimal press, minimal urgency.
May 22, 1980, the Quality Inn in Hasbrook Heights, New Jersey. A maid hears a woman screaming from room 117. She calls the manager calls the police. When officers arrive, they find Cottingham in the room with a sex worker he'd handcuffed to the bed. He was in the process of torturing her. They arrest him, search his car, find a predatory toolkit, handcuffs, gags, knives, rope. And when they search his home in Lodi, New Jersey, that quiet suburban house where his wife and kids live, they find a locked trunk in the attic. Inside, driver's licenses, jewelry, underwear, trophies for dozens of victims. Why did Cottingham refuse to confess for 40 years, and what finally made him break? For 40 years, Richard Cottingham sat in a New Jersey prison cell and said nothing. He was convicted of 5 murders in New Jersey and New York, but investigators knew there were more, dozens more, maybe over 100, and Cottingham wouldn't talk. Why? Because he enjoyed having secret knowledge. He loved knowing that there were families out there, mothers, sisters, daughters, who would never know what happened to their loved ones. It gave him power, even in prison. But in 2021, facing his own mortality, he was 75 in poor health, Cottingham broke. He started confessing cold cases from the 1960s, cases that had been unsolved for 50 years. Why did he finally talk? Because he wanted to be remembered. He wanted to go down in history as one of the most prolific serial killers in American history. His ego demanded it. Detective, Richard, just tell us. Give these families closure. Cottingham, in a raspy whisper. There were so many. You only know about the ones I let you find. I was the king of the deuce. Nobody saw me.
Richard Cottingham is currently 78 years old. He'll die in prison. His case led to the creation of cold case units, specifically focused on unsolved murders of sex workers. But here's the crack that still exists. Even today, murders of sex workers have lower clearance rates than other homicides. Even today, they get less media attention, fewer resources, shorter investigations. The system has better tracking. It still doesn't have equal priority. Which brings us to our final case, the one that started this entire archive, the one that proves all the cracks we've identified are still there. For 50 years, the Empire State has been refining its systems, better databases, better forensics, better protocols. And yet, Rex Heuermann, the architect from Massapequa, killed for 13 years before anyone stopped him. Why? Because he understood something the previous 9 killers proved. The system only works if it's looking for you.
Case number 10, Rex Heuermann.
We're back where we started. July 14th, 2023, Massapequa Park, Long Island. 40 federal agents, battering rams, forensic vans, and one man in handcuffs being led out of his suburban home. Rex Heuermann, 59 years old, architect, husband, father, and the prime suspect in the murders of at least 10 women whose bodies were found wrapped in burlap along Ocean Parkway. How does a city of 8 million people allow 10 apex predators to hunt for 50 years? Because the system was never designed to stop them. It was designed to react to them after the damage was done. Heuermann is the culmination of everything we've learned in this archive. He used media, Craigslist, like Berkowitz. He targeted marginalized victims like Rifkin and Cottingham. He exploited institutional apathy like Cullen. He hid behind a suburban mask like Chambers. He used technology to stay ahead of law enforcement. And for 13 years it worked, until it didn't.
Rex Heuermann designed office buildings in Midtown Manhattan. He understood codes, blueprints, systems, and he applied that same analytical mind to murder. He didn't kill impulsively, he engineered it. He used burner phones purchased with cash. He used separate email accounts created from public Wi-Fi. He used Craigslist to contact victims, never his personal phone. He disposed of bodies in a remote area he'd scouted years in advance, Gilgo Beach, a stretch of marsh where bodies could decompose for years before being discovered. This wasn't rage. This wasn't compulsion. This was a man who approached murder the way he approached architecture, as a problem to be solved. And it almost worked. Between 2010 and 2013, 10 sets of remains were discovered along Ocean Parkway. The Gilgo Four, Melissa Barthelemy, Megan Waterman, Amber Costello, Maureen Brainerd Barnes were found first. All sex workers, all strangled, all wrapped in burlap. The NYPD and Suffolk County PD created a task force, but they couldn't connect the cases to a suspect. Why? Because Heuermann understood the gaps in the system. He knew that burner phones were disposable. He knew that Craigslist ads were anonymous. He knew that if you targeted marginalized victims, the investigation would be slower, less urgent. He'd studied 50 years of serial killer cases, including the ones in this archive, and learned from their mistakes. So, how did they finally catch him? Through a technology that didn't exist when he started killing: genetic genealogy. Here's what happened. In 2010, when the first bodies were discovered, investigators collected DNA evidence from the burlap and the victims' bodies, but there were no matches in the criminal database. The case went cold. But in 2022, a new task force was formed, and they used genetic genealogy, the same technology that caught the Golden State Killer. They took the DNA from Gilgo Beach victims and uploaded it to public genealogy databases, and they found a familial match, a distant relative of the killer. That led them to a family tree, and at the end of that tree, Rex Heuermann. But they needed direct DNA to confirm, so they followed him for months, watching, waiting. And in January 2023, Heuermann went to his office in Midtown Manhattan, ordered a pizza, ate it at his desk, and threw the crust in the trash. A plainclothes officer retrieved the crust. The DNA was a 100% match. Remember at the beginning we said we'd tell you the exact number of lives lost because the system chose procedure over protection? Here it is. Across these 10 cases, over 700 confirmed victims, and those are just the confirmed cases. The real number is likely over 1,000. In the interrogation room at Suffolk County Police Headquarters, Rex Heuermann didn't act like a man whose life was over. He acted like a man whose project had been interrupted. Watch the footage. He's calm, almost annoyed. He keeps checking his watch like he has somewhere to be. Detective: Rex, we have the DNA. We have the phones. We have the search history. Why Gilgo Beach? Heuermann: flatly, I have nothing to say to you. I understand the codes. I understand the rules. You do your job. I'll do mine. This is compartmentalized rationality. Heuermann is treating the murder investigation like a zoning dispute. He believes that if he maintains his professional mask, he can negotiate his way out. He refuses to confess, refuses to explain, refuses to show any emotion. Because in his mind, he's not a monster. He's just someone who got caught breaking a rule.
Rex Heuermann is currently awaiting trial. He has been charged with 6 murders so far. Investigators believe there are more. The archive is closed, but the cracks are still open. Sleep well, New York, if you can.